You're watching the Battered Fans Network.
Welcome, everybody, to episode number 11 of the Battered MLS Fans Podcast. We are talking about Gregg Berhalter back in the MLS. And who better to talk Gregg the Leg with than Nick from Glass House Soccer? Now he's your guy. And then Ty Fisher from the Columbus Crew, Wisemen Podcast. He used to be your guy. And then I'm a U.S. men's national team fan. So I feel like we got the trifecta here. So let's get right into it. So let's start with Nick. You heard the news. How you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Cautiously optimistic. Just as a Chicago fan, you never can expect too little from your club, regardless of what sport it is. But yeah, cautiously optimistic. The rumors had been out there for a while that the club was targeting Gregg Berhalter. Was it going to be just as a head coach? Was it going to be in a dual executive coaching role? What other candidates were out there? No one really had heard much. So the fact that we finally got it done, that we got a guy with MLS experience, that we've got a guy who has an actual style of play and can help develop some of these younger players, everyone's feeling pretty good about it right now, especially since our season ended weeks ago, as far as we were concerned.
Well, and for those of you that are unaware about the Chicago history, Chicago came out with a lot of success right off the bat. They won the MLS Cup their first year. Their first 12 seasons, they made it to at least the conference finals, 8 of those first 12 seasons. And then after that 12th season, they've made it to the playoffs twice. Since 2010, they've made it to the playoffs twice. So it's a long way that they've fallen. And so I'm assuming anything at this point is positive. So I go over to Ty now. Ty, you had Gregg from 2013 to 2017, 18?
13, 14, 17, 18, yeah.
Okay. How was that? How was Gregg the Leg? I know he wasn't even that great because I believe his record was like 74 wins and like almost 74 losses or something like that.
I mean, the only up year that we had with Gregg was 2015, but even that's a down year because we lost in the MLS Cup final. I mean, it was about as good as you can have after Robert Warzija. First year was kind of rough. But second year was the good year. I mean, we had Kai Kamara, we had, Steve Clark, we had Michael Parkhurst, Will Trapp. I mean, we had guys that, could play under Berhalter. But after 15, it just started to decline. In comparison, just take Caleb Porter's 4 years in Columbus. It was kind of the same thing. But Berhalter built a identity with the club. I just think it wasn't backed very well with, purchasing players in the transfer market to kind of live up to that tactical identity that he wanted. And, then we just had to move on.
How was he as far as developing talent? Because I feel like with the U.S. men's national team, although he gets a lot of crap for not doing much with the talent that he got a nice young core of players. Now, you can attribute that to the fact that just the sport is growing in this country regardless. So I think whoever was there was going to have better talent than what they've had in the past. But regardless, it's under his tutelage that they got that talent and that they started to develop better players. Was he doing that in Columbus at all?
I mean, not really. No.
Okay.
I think it's more so if you wanted to develop young players, you would want to, give them playing time. He wasn't giving young players playing time. He also had a very mid-average age of maybe 27, 28 players, average age to play. So we didn't have, like the young players like we have now. Of course, times have changed over these last 10 years to where, the younger guys are starting to get playing time. But I mean, looking back on the 4 or 5 years that we had of Berhalter, he wasn't doing really well at developing like the young guys. I think the only young guy he probably developed was Will Trapp. And that's because he came out of the academy and signed a homegrown contract. But it's more so the fact that he wanted to have these good players, or he thought he thought they were good to kind of live up to this identity that he set for Columbus, and it just didn't work out.
Nick, in Chicago, are you guys expecting a fire sale? I mean, not that anybody's gonna buy your players, but are you guys expecting to clean house? I guess is a better way to put it, because I mean, Berhalter likes to play the possession game.
Mhm.
He likes to play out of the back. I don't know if you guys have the players that could. Are you expecting to get his son from the Whitecaps? Like, is that something that it's already like thought out? Like, we're gonna get his son to come from the Whitecaps over here.
Well, if it helps him fit the style and implement a new style and identity with the team, then I'd be okay with it. But we haven't heard any rumors about his son coming over yet. But yeah, there have been a few kind of insider online accounts and a lot of speculation as to the roster turning over and how Berhalter, especially in his dual role as director of football and head coach, is going to be able to build the roster he wants. So we are expecting a lot of turnover. In my opinion, there's maybe 5 guys who you're not going to touch. And that's Chris Brady, that's Brian Gutierrez, that's Hugo Kuipers, Kellen Acosta, and I say Mauricio Pineda. And those 3 of those guys are on homegrown deals, or they are homegrowns. So that's going to give you even more roster flexibility. So we are going to see the roster change from a wingback playing up the wings style, and then just trying to cross it into Hugo Kuipers or Koutsias or whoever is in the middle at that time, to a more possession style. So he's going to have to turn this roster over. I don't think there's anyone other than those 5 guys I mentioned that are untouchable on this roster. And Chris Brady, heck, they may sell him and slot in one of their new goalkeepers they're developing too, who's going to be really well. And they take that money and turn it into a roster rebuild. But yeah, the Chicago Fire fans, we are expecting a new style of play. We are absolutely expecting a new tactical style and roster turnover here.
Gregg Berhalter, he has those connections to the U.S. national team, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a positive? Because I look at that as a positive, right? You got Kellen Acosta already on the squad, but you might have some other players that have played under him for the U.S. men's national team that maybe will make their way over also. Is that you said most fans are excited about this or trying to be optimistic. Are you optimistic about the players that he can bring to the team? Because I mean, you guys spend money. Like, you guys are willing to spend money.
Yeah, and that's where I think it's kind of a really good comparison here from what Ty was saying about how Berhalter was with the Crew at a time when they weren't trying to spend a lot of money. The Chicago Fire have an owner who is willing to put that money up. They just signed Hugo Kuipers, record signing, $12 million transfer fee, buying out Xherdan Shaqiri, or I should say mutually parting ways with him after giving him a giant contract, buying out Kasper Shabilko. So they are ready to spend the money where it can be most effective. So I think that is going to bode very, very well for trying to recruit over some of these USMNT players. The fans are already starting to put like blurry pictures of Weston McKennie in their profiles to try and kind of manifest that into some sort of reality. I don't know if they're going to be able to lure him away from Juventus. But people are also bringing up maybe Gio Reyna, who's not getting a lot of playing time in Europe, coming back to the MLS, possibly coming back to the Chicago Fire. We know the backstory with Berhalter and the Reyna family.
I don't know. Out of all the players, I think that's the one that I could probably like. That's not happening.
Yeah,
you probably have a better chance of publicity.
The fact remains, though, that Berhalter is still plugged in. He developed great personal relationships with a lot of these USMNT players, not just the starters, the entire pool of players as well. So maybe you see a guy. I don't know if this is a realistic one, but if you look at like a De La Fuente or someone who was playing like at Barca B or like a Mark McKenzie who maybe wants to come back from Belgium, maybe he would slot in well with Berhalter and his system and getting a nice steady paycheck, a decent paycheck from an MLS club. That could absolutely happen. And we got 2 open DP slots, so you never know.
I think that he made it to the final in 2015, like Ty said. He wasn't necessarily crazy successful. He made it to the playoffs, I think 4 out of his 5 years there, but his winning percentage was like a 37, 38%. Like, it wasn't anything out of this world. But with that said, he has history in the MLS. He has history with the national team. I would assume he's built connections. Even though in the chat they're saying that nobody wants to play for him, I think he's built some positive connections because some of the players did like him. I think that bodes well, especially the fact that, I mean, I don't know how else to say it. You guys were bottom feeders for the last decade plus, so beggars can't be choosers. I think that this is a good hire for the Chicago Fire. Dropping bars. Ty, if you had to grade this from, let's use the school grading scale, A to F, how do you grade this acquisition by the Chicago Fire?
I mean, given what the Fire have been under Frank Klopas this season, and just in general, and then looking at what Berhalter had done with the USMNT, I can see why you say it's a good hire. Berhalter does have the MLS experience. If I had to give it a grade, I'd probably go a low B minus, maybe B minus to a C. I think I more so want to see what he does if he's made any tactical changes. I don't know if he still plays that 4-2-3-1 that he loves. I want to see how he's able to incorporate those names that Nick said. And if he does well, then by all means, I think it's going to be a good year for the Chicago Fire.
Before I get to you, Nick, because obviously I want you to go last because yes, your squad. I'm gonna go B plus. I don't think that he, especially after the run, even though if you look at it and take a step back, he technically had the most success that we've seen from a men's U.S. men's national team. I mean, ever possibly, right? Trophy wise, even though they're just beating Mexico over and over again, but still, it is what it is. It's the trophies. He got them. He's gotten a few. So even though it didn't end well and he got rehired after they let his contract expire and all that mess and the geo rate, like it was messy. Despite all that, I still think that where the Chicago Fire were and where they're trying to go, I think he's a big enough name. He has enough connections, and he has a history of developing players in the United States. And I think that's going to bode well for homegrowns and players that want to go to the Chicago Fire as young players. So I'm going to say it's a B plus. Nick, I leave it to you. What is the grade for your hire?
Yeah, I mean, I could go just crazy homer here and be like, this is an A+ hiring with extra credit, but I'm with you guys for a few different reasons. I think this is a solid B type of a hire here. We've looked at coaching candidates in Chicago in the past, and people have said Jesse Marsch should have been the head coach. They should have just thrown a whole bag of money at him and done anything they could to bring him in. So when you have names like that being thrown around, and then you end up with a Gregg Berhalter, I'd say, okay, maybe we'll drop the grade down a little bit to a B, but at the same time, they're not doing what they've done the last 2 or 3 hires. They are not going back to Frank Klopas. First of all, they're not trying to go find like the next guy in Europe who might be up and coming, like a Paunovic or a Wiki. Yazir Hendrickson was an interesting one. There's a lot to dig into his coaching tenure. So that's why I think this was a solid B. Where I will kind of give them a little allowance is how are they going to play this in the long game? Because if you bring in a coach, yeah, maybe he gets 2 to 4 years before he moves on, before you fire him, whatever. But we've got him as the director of football as well as the head coach. So if he is going to coach for 2, 3, 4 years, we'll say, and then move solely into that executive role, there's already got to be a plan in motion for finding the next head coach. And maybe that's when you go find some
Well, that's
big
when you have
name.
to look into his coaching staff. A lot of times they hire with him in those scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, BJ Callahan's already in Nashville, so a lot of his national team connections probably have already found their home for the next few years. So we'll see who he ends up filling out his staff with.
That's true. Well, but I do see it. And he had both roles in Columbus also, did he not, Ty?
Well, he was a sporting director and head coach.
Okay.
So
he's done the dual role thing before.
Yeah, so he was like who does it now? Peter Vermees.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So like I think it was a pretty good hire. I think Chicago, I mean, you don't have many reasons to be optimistic. So I think that this is one to try to be cautiously optimistic. So I think it was good. And I'm interested to see what he does because you know that he's going to have a lot of attention his way because people are dying to criticize him. So, you know, I'm rooting for him. Hopefully he shuts a lot of people up because, you know, I think that although he wasn't the best, I think that he does get unnecessary hate on top of that. So,
yeah, I do gotta ask Ty if I can jump in real quick.
Yeah, please.
Does this reignite the Chicago-Columbus rivalry that has not existed for 15 some years? No. Do you think this can add fuel to that fire?
No. No. I mean, if Chicago is a fraction of what, say, FC Cincinnati is under Gregg Berhalter next year, I think so, because I would love to see the mindset of Gregg Berhalter go up against Wilfried Nancy for the first time. But I don't think so. I think it's more so it's just going to be, hey, okay, Chicago's going to become relevant again in Columbus's eyes, I would say. Chicago's going to become relevant again. Now, if, again, Chicago is just a fraction of how good Cincinnati is, maybe we can hit that rivalry again, because that was a fun rivalry to even go to. What was it before SeatGeek Stadium? It was Toyota Park. That's Toyota what it was. Park, yeah. Yep. And then, Chicago fans come back to Columbus, and, I think that was a true rivalry before, everything happened. But I want to give it about a year or so to see how he does with Chicago, and maybe it does reignite that spark. But I still think the Crew fans are going to say, "Oh yeah, Cincinnati is just our rival."
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, yeah, that's. I think that you guys are locked in with Hell is Real.
Yeah.
And I can't say it enough. The fact that Chicago has such a good run to start off their franchise, those 12 years, 8 conference finals appearances or better. That's insane. And to fall off that much, it really sucks. So hopefully for you guys, this works out. I'm kind of rooting for you guys. All right. Ty, thank you for joining. Any final words? And please let everybody know where they can find you.
Well, first of all, why do I always get cooked in this chat? What is happening? Bro, I just get cooked in this chat.
Well, I mean, we have a lot of Miami fans in the chat, and how we feel about Columbus at this moment.
Oh yeah, no, I know. It's okay. No, I still love you guys. No, thanks again for having me. Good times. Nick, good seeing you again. Can't wait to talk to you. If you guys want to talk about Columbus Crew, you guys can find me over at Wisemen Say Podcast. If you guys like to read stuff, you guys can find more work on Master Report and 404 Crew. You guys can follow me on Twitter at FisherTyler__.
And Nick, let everybody know where, because look, people are going to be interested in Gregg Berhalter, so let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'll actually, after I get offline here with you guys, I'll be recording my next podcast episode about the Berhalter hire in full detail over on the Feed the Fire podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can interact with me on social media at Glasshouse Soccer.
There we go. I love to hear that. Appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And then make sure that you tune in with us tomorrow. We'll be talking Battered MLS fans at 10 o'clock, talking some awards tomorrow night. So make sure you tune in for that. So appreciate everybody hanging out. For those of you in the chat, we appreciate that. Please leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we'll be back tomorrow night. So until the next one, have a good one.